damn, does anybody care? This planet's empty, I see no signs of life. Please don't tell me that the human race did not survive. There are no people in the future. There are no people. There are no people in the future. No people at all. There are no people in the future. Where did all my people go? There are no people in the future. Let me try my people call. Where are all my people? Where are all my people? I guess I'll fly away now.
Hey, everybody. Welcome. Yes, it is. So we're getting a little echo here. Hold on. There we go. I think I got that taken care of. A little quirky here this morning. So yes, hello. Welcome. It is Friday, June 28th, 2024. Welcome to Raging Chicken's Friday Politics Roundup. Yes, this is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken. Each week we break down the good, the bad, and the ugly in state and national politics. Today we'll be focusing mostly on the aftermath of last night's presidential debate. Did you watch it? What are you thinking? How you feeling? You can support today's show becoming a patron for as little as $5 a month. Head on over to patreon.com/rcpress for all the deets. And you can help out the show right now by heading over to our YouTube channel if you're not there already. Smash that subscribe button, like the stream for this show, and hit that notification bell so you know every time that we go live. That becomes all the more important right now as I'm telling you, this has been this rambling, ongoing combination of weird tech stuff, sickness, and just life chaos that has put our schedule made it a little bit quirky. So hitting that subscribe button, smashing that little bell, let you know when you get this, when the show goes live. And if you're one of our awesome podcast listeners, make sure to leave us a 5-star review, whatever platform you listen on. Leave a comment, let folks know why you like the show. Little things like this help other people find the show. For more PA Progressive Talk, tune in to the Rick Smith Show's live stream at 9 p.m. Eastern, his YouTube channel, Twitter, Facebook, wherever you get your podcasts. Check out the RickSmithShow.com for the latest across all the platforms. It's going to be important to be checking out Sisters of the Night Caucus podcast. The amazing PA women stirring the political cauldron behind this podcast rock the house. Yes, they do. And they know where the bodies are buried. Make sure to follow them on Twitter at The Night Caucus. It's at The Night Caucus over there. And subscribe to their podcast on Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcast. And The Signal is the podcast from the Bucks County Beacon. The Signal is hosted by the Beacon's editor-in-chief, Cyril Michaleko, and produced by yours truly. Twice a month, The Signal will shine a light on the right-wing extremist currents streaming through Bucks County and beyond. Cyril invites guests who can provide insight, analysis, and organizing solutions so we can steer the community toward calmer, saner, progressive roots. Check out the buckscountybeacon.com. One more time. buckscountybeacon.podbean.com. Check out the podcast or get The Signal wherever you get your podcast. Most recent drop just happened this week is with Darren Lawston. He's, of course, the parent in the Pembridge School District who sued the district because of its shadow banning of multiple books in the library, then lying about it, attempting to cover it up. It's a great interview with Darren. Please go over there and check it out. For all you gamers out there, the Game Inn, that's with 2 N's, the Game Inn is a Quakertown-based black family-owned gaming store. They're friends of the show, and they've got everything from retro N64s, latest consoles, video games for all platforms, collectibles, action figures, Funko Pops, walls of Funko Pops. Good grades on report cards get your kid discount too, so I know the school is out, but maybe just bring that in anyways and let them know. And make sure you let them know Raging Chicken Press sent you. Got a question about a game, look for something hard to get, they've got you covered. Check them out on the Facebook page and follow them on Twitter at The Game In. That's with 2 N's, at The Game In on Twitter. Shoot them a message or drop them an email at thegameinpa@gmail.com. And if you find yourself in the Kutztown area, you've got to check out the Heart and Hearth Deli and Smokehouse located at 466 West Main Street. That's kitty corner from the Kutztown University campus. The Heart and Hearth is an American bistro featuring barbecue and French-inspired fare, and it is mwah. And everything is locally sourced and organic. You got to check it out. Place is amazing. Colleen Fitzgerald, the chef, the proprietor of the Heart and Hearth Deli and Smokehouse, was just on 69 News, WFMZ 69 News in their morning show. Did a little cook-up. Pretty cool. Special shout out goes to Jonathan Mann, who wrote our intro song, There Are No People in the Future. Check out all his great stuff and follow him on his YouTube page. You can check them out on Twitter at Song of Dayman with 2 N's, at Song of Dayman on Twitter. Look, we want a progressive future, need progressive media, support Pull No Punches, homegrown progressive media today. Become a patron to Raising Chicken for as little as $5 a month. Go to patreon.com/rcpress. We're here for the fight, and we need you. Become a patron for the price of a good beer once a month. Help keep the media in the movement the media. Become a patron for as little as $5 a month. Or go to patreon.com/rcpress today. Well, welcome, everybody. Shout out first goes to Emily. Emily, I hope you're going to feel better. Emily just said that she just posted she started off the summer with Lyme disease. Yep, I just finished her antibiotics, so hope it goes well. Emily, shout out to you, and wish you a quick recovery. My daughter had that not too long ago, years ago, and then it's been apparently I've known this year alone. I've known about 3 or 4 people who I've heard who got Lyme. Ticks must be really especially bad this year, and again. If you want to doom and gloom it like me, that climate change is only going to make this worse. So there you go. So there's a lot of stuff that we could talk about. And there's a lot of stuff going on in the news. But I thought today we just we could talk a little bit about last night's presidential debate. Now I want to preface this by saying I purposely did not watch the debate last night. Okay. I thought about it, been thinking about it, and for a bunch of reasons, I find myself incredibly resistant right now to getting wound up in the same mode as the last couple elections for that matter. And I think some of that has to do with just my own mental health. And the other part has to do with the assumptions that I'm making about how the media is going to cover all this. We're going to cover this thing just like it's just any other old debate. They're going to go get in their lanes. They're going to do what they're supposed to do. They're going to cover and I just was not up for that little, performance. That doesn't mean that I was uninterested, right? So, got up this morning, right? I listened to some of the commentary on it, read a bunch of articles about it, listened to some of the debate afterwards, and so felt like I wanted to do a little bit on my terms, just for myself, right? But I will say we were out walking our dog last night, and kind of took a longer walk in the evening. And my wife had just want to point it out. So that, a lot of the houses that we've been walking by, you could see, in the windows and people watching the debate. And again, this is a small little kind of window into the world, right? Small little window into, from our perspective in our town, that here's this debate. And again, you got to say in the Penridge School District, politics has been pretty charged of late. So maybe there's more people watching it than others, maybe because the demographic in Percy tends to skew a little bit older. Maybe that had something to do with it, or just happened to be where we walked. Who knows? But just whatever. So I'm in my head, I'm like, oh, that's good, I guess. There have been a lot of talk about this debate ahead of time with, but by the fact that it was strange that it was happening in June, right? It's really odd to have a debate this early before the party conventions, when the official nominations go through and all that stuff. But whatever. Right. And if you remember months ago, there was talks like Trump was just saying, will Trump even debate, right? Will he debate and all this other kind of stuff, especially after he got just convicted of 34, felonies. And, he doesn't need to show up. He didn't show up at any of the Republican debates, so why would he show up to one with Joe Biden? But maybe that was part of the calculus and the part of the Biden administration or something. I don't know. Just at least let's get some of the debates, get this guy on the stage, especially right after the felony convictions. Who knows? I mean, there's a lot of speculation about why and so on. But there. And I think in the mind of a lot of the, at least the Democratic Party leadership, that, Joe Biden basically all he had to do is go out there and just, hit the key points and not kind of come across as you know, a disaster, and basically kind of tout his record on a few things and draw the contrast, and that was it. And let Trump be a lie. Let everybody else be reminded of how horrible this guy is. Right? Let remind like how the lies he's going to tell, the conspiracy theories he's going to connote, the rewriting of history that he's got. I mean, all the stuff that Trump does, right? And just being an all-around horrible like individual, right? So all that stuff, I mean, the guy's convicted of a sexual assault now. He's convicted of 34 felonies. He's been found guilty of kind of business fraud. I mean, you name it. I mean, this guy's a disaster, right? He was a disaster for the country then, right? Not only is he a racist bigot and all this other stuff. And yeah, obviously he's got a very vocal minority of people that are kind of behind him because they share all those values. Whatever. So all Biden had to do up there is just be a human being that was somewhat competent. The one concern, of course, had to do with, and this has been one of the Republicans' kind of attacking points, has been about Biden's age, right? They're really going after him being old. So he had to get up there and kind of do what he did at the State of the Union address, right? Be a little fired up, right? Kind of like get a little kind of sarcasm in here and there. Become across as someone who's likable, right? And yeah, if it has to be likable as your grandfather, okay, it's likable as your grandfather, right? Well, anybody who watched the debate or saw clips of it or heard takes on it know that that is not what happened last night. By all reactions, here, this is a headline from Politico. I think this kind of captures it. The Dems freak out over Biden's debate performance. Quote, Biden is toast, someone was quoted saying. A lot of these kind of Democratic Party kind of strategists or even donors and this kind of stuff, they're really concerned, right? And I want to read some of the reactions that in some of the newspapers in kind of a minute, because like I was curious about how. I'd be honest with you, I could care less what Fox is going to say, because you know what Fox is going to say ahead of time, right? So all they were going to do is pile on. I'm curious more about the kind of midline sources, like the kind of more mainstream media sources and so on, just to kind of see what they're at. But I want to start off with a little bit of a segment from the Majority Report. The Majority Report, for those folks, I know that a lot of folks who listen to this show may also listen to that show. It's a Sam Cedar and Emma Vigeland, the Majority Report, and they always do debate coverage, right? And usually you got the debate playing in the background. They're talking over the debate. They're making comments on it and stuff like this. It's kind of like, takes on things as they're happening. Then they're kind of like, having some drinks, stuff like that. So it's kind of a little bit of a party, it's like that kind of thing. It's like a watch party type of thing. But after the debate, they have kind of discuss takes on it. They'll review some, and then kind of give their kind of perspective on things. So last night, they had, let's see if this is the spot. Okay. Last night, it became pretty clear in the debate that Joe Biden was having a disastrous performance. And I watched, if you listen to CNN's response to that's the one I actually watched first. I watched CNN's response to the debate first, just to get a take on how things are being framed. And was it Van Jones, and then the kind of lead guy there, I always forget his name. They, we're kind of saying this is bad. I mean, so Van Jones would be out there basically saying that Biden may have to step aside, right? It was like, whoa, you got to be kidding me. And then I started reading some other things in there. And so I went over the Majority Report and I want to hear their take on it. And so I want to play you a little bit of their take on things. And then, I'll comment on that too as well. So this is weird because it's a take on a take, but like here, this is their lead up in terms of how they are going to see how MSNBC responded to this. In part, the reason why they did this was because they saw that, commentary coming from CNN, it was happening on social media. Everyone was talking about this as an absolute disaster. And during their show, right, they were also talking about how this is a disastrous performance. And so they were curious, like the setup was going to see, okay, MSNBC is talking about this, want to actually get a sense of how MSNBC is actually responding to this stuff, given how a disastrous performance is. And this is a telling kind of moment. So let me see if I got the right spot.
The old feed, we can do both feeds. Is that true?
Yeah, here we go.
Okay, great.
All right.
All right, with the new feed, let's hear what I'm curious what MSNBC is going to say about this.
Here we go.
Really, actually, generally, I'm interested in Fox, but
being very hard to hear. It's hard to tell what he was saying because his voice was so weak. And his halting delivery in his first couple of answers is got to have put a shock into the campaign, at least at the start, before he started to get stronger.
Yeah, I mean, I was on the phones for some of it after that became clear, and there is a conversation happening inside.
Hey, conversation.
Oh my God.
Come on, Kamala, let's just go. Let's do it.
And I think
I should say that was introduced by Rachel Maddow and was followed up. Who's speaking right now is Nicole Wallace. Okay. So she said she was on the phone talking to some Democrats, and there were several conversations that were going on right now. I'll rewind a little bit. Hold on.
Oh my God.
Happening. Yeah, I mean.
Okay, so it starts off with Rachel Maddow. Here you go.
What he was saying because his voice was so weak. And his halting delivery in his first couple of answers is got to have put a shock into the campaign, at least at the start, before he started to get stronger.
This is Nicole Wallace.
Yeah, I mean, I was on the phones for some of it after that became clear, and there is a conversation happening inside.
Hey, conversation.
Oh my God.
Come on, Kamala, let's just go. Let's do it.
And I think there will be stories of a lot of concern about the performance tonight. And I think when
you say conversations happening, what do you mean?
I think people are talking. I think the conversations range from whether he should be in this race tomorrow morning to what was wrong with him.
Wow.
That came out. Our own Kelly O'Donnell reported that a few minutes in, but exactly what
negative
you articulated.
COVID test, but a cold.
Right. So those things were, I mean, the reason reporters were reporting on the cold was because of what you articulated. I mean, the voice was very, very soft. It wasn't the Joe Biden performance of the State of the Union. It wasn't seizing a moment to get on the offensive on immigration. It wasn't
or anything.
Joe Biden on the offensive on
January 6th.
Not ready to go on the offensive on Joe Biden on the offensive on abortion.
Castro.
His two.
I got 25 texts during this debate, and all more or less
tonally, but
ranges from get your passport ready.
The debate.
You're too sober for this.
Did not.
Maybe we should have had Jill Stein in this debate.
He did give Joe Biden.
Wait, hold on.
When Biden loses, Israel's no longer the issue.
They were in Bobby Kennedy's register.
He's Horace. Exactly. Exactly.
From the Biden aid is we can't.
If you had Bobby Kennedy been in there, at least Biden would have seemed like, oh well, this voice is not that bad.
Americans protested in a slight cold as well, so I understand.
So there you go. So you get a sense, and this is you hear Sam Cedar and Emma Vigeland kind of talking over Nicole Wallace kind of a bit there toward the end, but you heard their wows. Right, they purposely turn on MSNBC to kind of get a sense of, okay, how is this going to be spun into something good, and instead, not. So that's Nicole Wallace. Now, if you know Nicole Wallace has been vehemently anti-Trump, but Nicole Wallace is a Republican kind of strategist, right? She was the communications, director. She worked in communications for the George Bush administration, George W. Bush administration. She's been a Republican kind of operative here. I have to say, I have always really liked her as a commentator from the Republican side of things, because I've always respected her willingness to not just go to the spin, right, and to break with, Republican orthodoxy. And that's become even more apparent as you kind of move into the Trump era. But having said that, she's still kind of Republican. So you could basically listen to what she's saying, say, okay, this is the Republican side of it, but that's here. So now what happens, they turn to Joy Reid. Now, Joy Reid is pretty, I've always seen her as one of the strongest boosters of the Democratic Party. She is Team Den, Team Blue. right? She's frustrated the hell out of me. In the sense that like she would seem like there's been like multiple times which she is more than willing to just like get on the Dem side regardless because they're Dems, right? And to do all that kind of, but that has changed a little bit around some of the stuff around Israel and Palestine coverage. That's been kind of interesting. Kind of on race questions, she's generally kind of really good. But she's been kind of like strong team player, right? But here's Joy Reid in her response.
Exactly. At least
let's see me get ahead here. Okay, here we go.
It seemed like, oh well, this voice is not that bad.
Negative protest and a slight cold as well, so I understand
here's
not
Joy Reid.
Feeling well, and obviously
that's too on PC for Joe Rogan show
stutter.
Yeah, Sam, don't
Wait, I am curious what Joy has to say.
To mitigate the way that he speaks, and you can understand it, and we've observed him for a long time. That said, I too was on the phone throughout much of the debate with Obama, world people, Democrats.
Old Brendan said, I thought he was great.
Campaign operatives. My phone really never
Joy's earned my respect recently with all of her Palestine coverage.
The universal reaction was somewhere approaching panic. The people who were texting
panic, yes, good.
Very concerned about President Biden seeming extremely feeble, seeming extremely weak. And, you know, I'll just reiterate what I said earlier. President Biden had one job tonight, and it was one primary job. And yes, it was to
don't be as old as you are,
and all of those things. But he had to settle his own party.
Mm-hmm.
He needed to settle Democrats. Democrats, you know, they always talk about Democrats are bedwetters and Democrats are always panicking. Yes, Democrats are always panicking. They're always scared, right? They're always thinking they're going to lose. Democrats are very pessimistic. This is just who they are. They're neurotic. But Joe Biden's job was to reassure them tonight. His job was to calm his party, to make them feel that, yes, I can do this. I have 4 more years in me. I have the ability and the stamina and the strength to do 4 more years. He did not do that. He did the opposite of that. He made them more panicked. The people who were texting me were even more panicked. They actually expected it to be better than it was.
I did too.
And now they're in I won't say a full-fledged panic, but it's getting there.
And are people that you're talking to are expressing
I want to hear what Morning Joe says, right? I mean, this is the one.
Okay, so that's Joy Reid. And Joy Reid is, again, she's very, very close to the Obama folks, you know, not just like the Obamas themselves, but that kind of world and people that were kind of around it. And she's even saying that people were panicked there. What comes up further in this discussion is that there's actually, you know, there's been discussions about kind of replacing him at the convention and things like this. And I, you know, and I got to say that there's, that's a little bit, I mean, it's like too little too late. Now, look, I'm not saying that thing, but like, I mean, what has got to be said at this point is that Biden really produced a moment of panic or crisis in the party leadership, right? I think in the party leadership and the people who are really plugged into what's going on here. But I would also suggest that if there are people who did watch last night, who are only marginally kind of watching politics right now, and don't pay attention to all the kind of policy issues and differences and things like this, objectively, I think they would look at Biden's performances as dismal and concerning. I want to give you a sense of what I thought USA Today did a kind of like reaction story to that by interviewing a bunch of voters. And I want to read a couple segments of this. I mean, their article was painful in quotation marks. Swing state voters react to Biden-Trump presidential debate. It's a voter in Nevada compared President Joe Biden's performance to elder abuse. A voter in Georgia was so disgusted with what he was hearing from the Democratic incumbent and former President Donald Trump that he quit watching, walked to the liquor store and bought a 6-pack of beer. Another voter in Wisconsin called it a painful experience. Americans reacted to the first presidential debate of 2024 with a mix of exhaustion, trepidation, and disgust. The face-off between the current president and his predecessor was the earliest televised debate in American history, taking place before either man has officially declared the party's candidate in the National Party conventions. Some people were reacting. It was like, I mean, if you watch, I mean, I watched a good chunk of it now. They're swinging insults back and forth. Like, for example, you have the morals of an alley cat, Biden told Trump, citing former president's sexual escapade with the former porn star Stormy Daniels. Trump called Biden the worst president in history and kept referring to his opponent as a liar who's unable to tell the truth. You're a whiner, Biden told Trump, referring to his refusal to accept the results of the 2020 election. You can't stand loss. Something snapped in you when you lost last time, right? And kind of it goes on. There's this part here that I want to so. Good luck. Okay, yes. Voters attending the debate watched the party in Wisconsin's liberal bastion, the capital of Wisconsin, lamented the choice in front of them. Noah Anders, 24, grimaced when he asked what he thought about the debate. Quote, "It was a painful experience to sit through," unquote, Anders said. Neither candidate inspires our country. Anders, who will soon start law school at the University of Wisconsin, and the debate said the debate left him with concerns about Biden's cognitive abilities, but that he also questions Trump's mental acuity. Quote, "To be president, you deal with a lot of tough issues. I don't know if they have the ability to navigate the nuance and hardships of the job," he said. Good luck, America. Right? Now those are just because some of the reaction stuff. And these are relatively people who are kind of relatively plugged into as well. What I wanted to give you that one particular reaction for, because I think that, at least from my sense of things, that could very much be the biggest takeaway of this debate. There's some other things that, I'm thinking I'm going to play too much of the majority report coverage of this or of stuff specifics from the debate at this point. But Lawrence O'Donnell makes a good point in the MSNBC coverage, basically saying, well, look, we're going to know more when actually the polls come out in kind of a couple of weeks, which is probably true. Chris Hayes makes a point that basically says, well, look, you have two jobs in kind of, say, when you're president, right? One, when you're actually the president, it's about kind of making decisions. And Chris Hayes says that, look, on his decision making, I like a lot of what he's done, right? And he said, but on what a presidential candidate that when you're running for, your primary job is to communicate, right? Communicate what you've done and what your policies are and so on. And he gives an example of Biden putting a halt to the liquid natural gas exports, right? And how that just like wreaked havoc in OPEC, right? And was basically an action that was taken by the U.S. president, right? Or the U.S. presidency or U.S. government to have a direct impact on oil prices and OPEC's control over oil prices that we've been kind of, for the longest time, we've been kind of subjected to. And I mean globally, like OPEC has controlled all of that stuff. And so it's not a market, right? It's not just like a free market as we imagine. No, it has to do with kind of when things are released and so on. So Biden did that. And then what Chris Hayes then says is, but Biden should be the one out there. He's like, when we cut stuff up for our show, we talk about that on our show, we got all these reactions. I had no idea he did this, right? It's like, so you might have a policy like that was passed. And if you are somebody who's like paying very, very close attention to politics, that was passed. But the job of the American presidency is then to communicate what those policies are, right? Sam Cedar goes on to say, look, he's like, this debate, this debate is not going to change my mind, right? And I will echo that, right? Let me be 100% clear, right? If this is who we have going in the fall, I mean, let me put it this way. Regardless of who we have on the Democratic side of the ticket, I will be voting for that Democrat as opposed to Donald Trump. I want to be 100% clear about that, right? And I will also say, though, in the same note, that it is a defensive vote. It's this further slide into authoritarianism, or to keep the door open for democracy just kind of for additional 4 years. I think at the very baseline, though, we have to be clear-headed in the fact that this shows you the weakness of Democratic Party leadership, especially when it comes to the refusal, right, to create a strong bench. Right. If you remember back in the back in 2020, there was a lot of discussion. Say Biden saw that he had to go in and be basically like the placeholder presidency, like he had to ensure to protect democracy, right? And there was kind of what's probably spin at this point, if you look back at it. But what there was, people suggesting that Biden really sees himself as a one-term president, right? That he wants to kind of like be the stopgap, and then so make sure that we have kind of the strongest candidate possible running in 2024, right? I think most people who pay a lot of attention to politics thought that was utter nonsense, that that's not the way these people work and function, that once they get into power, they don't want to leave, they want to keep it going. So kind of saw that going, and saw that for what it was. And it turns out absolutely true, right? There was no attempt whatsoever to actually kind of build a secondary possibility. And that's now, coming to bear at this point. Now we're starting to kind of really see what that means. So anyways, so I want to, that was clear. And Sam Cedar makes this point too. And he said, it does, I think probably even more generous in some sense that, that I can sometimes be, but I think, right, and say, look, ideologically, if you look at the decisions that were being made, right, he kind of follows off Chris Hayes as part of the decisions that were being made. Ideologically, this is one of the best presidencies for, say, progressives in at least my lifetime. Look at what's happening with labor, not just in terms of the policies that have been passed, but for example, the strengthening of the National Labor Relations Board, right, to be more pro-worker. We saw, like, again, the biggest climate bill passed in U.S. history, again, nowhere near what it needs to be, right? But then continuing to push these, the implications of these policies, the ramping up of antitrust by beginning to go after some of these things, by putting Janet Yellen in the office. There's a whole bunch of things that we could put on here. But poll after poll shows that when you ask people, you tell them about the climate policy, you tell them about the kind of all these, they don't know about it. And I think part of that is a function of the poor communications of not just to Joe Biden, but of the Democratic Party leadership as a whole. Like really not having a strategic communication understanding, a strategic understanding of communication, or how you actually kind of continue to ramp up these, put these policies out. And we've talked about this before on the show, so I'm not going to belabor that point. So ideologically, this is one of the best presidencies just in terms of policies that were passed during this period of time. Right? Now, that the little caveat with that has to be that most of this was not put into law. It had to be about how existing law was being enforced. Right? It had to do with some policies. Yes, some of it was law, but then how the policies were enforced and how the laws were enforced and how they were kind of carried out in the executive, all that kind of stuff. And so some of them are less durable than others. Right? So in other words, once a Democrat leaves office or Biden leaves office, right, that next president's coming and could reverse those things, right? Because some of those things are done through executive actions and so on, right? Now they're harder to do, they're harder to reverse those actions because it turns out that they're popular, right? And they've already had impacts. I mean, even if you just look at the number of electric cars that are on the road now, right? That's a function of that. If you look at the kind of what's sales and induction stoves and some other things that were part of the Inflation Reduction Act, right? What do they call it? That huge climate policy, that's all increased. You look at auto manufacturers, for example, like Hyundai, right? Hyundai for the past 2 years, they've had the best electric car, right? Been voted the best electric car. Won awards about this for 2 of the different cars, 2 separate years. They're opening kind of manufacturing facilities in the United States so that more Americans can qualify for the rebates for the electric cars, right? A lot of good things that are going on, right? But again, I think this is happening in kind of really a fragmented thing. Some of that is our media environment, some of that is the way that social media functions, a whole bunch of other stuff. But it also has large component that has to land on the back of the Democratic Party leadership and their lack of a really effective communication strategy, right? Simply going and talking about how Republicans are bad or how Donald Trump is bad, that is not enough, right? We've talked about Anat Shenko-Rosario on the show. She's a communication specialist, and the way that she refers to this always as you need to kind of build a better tomorrow, right? You need to kind of build that future. You need to kind of not build the better, show the see, I said it wrong now. Show the beautiful tomorrow, right? Show the beautiful future, basically. Like, you need to have that picture. You need to say this is where this is going, so that it begins to kind of so people. Everyday people have a place to put these different policies, right? This goes back to the way that kind of framing works, right? When you talk about cognitive framing, when you're talking about the way that communication functions, if you do not have a frame of reference in the way that you think about the world, right, then you will experience these disparate kind of components, these different policies in these cases, just as kind of like fragments that are out there. You don't understand, right? You don't. I don't mean that people are dumb. That's not my point. My point is that there's no place to put it. So it comes across, it doesn't fit into a coherent understanding that we begin to see it kind of coming together. You have to build the frame as well as those individual policies, right? So when I say that, you're putting someone on the National Labor Relations Board that is going to be pro-worker, right? That should immediately fall into place with like, oh, look at Starbucks was finally brought to the table, and now they're actually negotiating with their workers. Look at the kind of uptick in union activity. Look at these workers who were kind of who got their jobs back, like, because found out there was abuse, and that had everything to do with these decisions that were made by the Biden administration, right? And if I have that frame of reference of this pro-labor frame of reference of this kind of what they're trying to do and why this is about protecting workers and making sure that workers have the protections they deserve, and then to see the policy come up and then, oh, here's a victory, then you need to connect it, right? You need to bring it into the frame, connect it to the frame, just like we said, here's another example, here's another. So then that frame gets built up over time. And the stronger you build the frame, the harder it is to take those things away. Because then you're not just kind of reversing a specific policy that to most people experience as something in the abstract, but what you do is that you're asking them, you were trying to take away their frame, something that they've now become committed to, right? The right wing in this country is brilliant at doing this stuff. They build frames first, right? And that's why, I really do believe this is one of the reasons why people get so frustrated, because, you have Republicans contradict themselves all over the place, right? But they don't when it comes to their frames, right? They don't come to their frame. What they do is they build a strong frame, right? Whether it's racist frames, whether it's religious frames, whatever it is, where people are beginning to think in those terms. And then they try out messaging. And yes, a lot of those messages and those articulations may be contradictory. But they don't give a shit about that, right? They don't care that they're contradictory. What they're looking for are the ones that are going to stick to the frame that they can then utilize. Like Frank Luntz, the Republican strategist, kind of language or linguistic strategist, communication strategist, I can't say strategist today. You always said that, right? You always say you need something that's going to fit these, you're going to fit these frames. You test your language to figure out which one kind of activates what you want it to activate. If you build strong frames, you're basically looking for what is the message that's going to connect them to these messages. And the frames on the Republican Party have consistently gotten further and further more extreme to the right. Well, let's just say further and further more associated with Christian nationalist kind of identitarian politics. Right? White Christian nationalist identitarian politics, patriarchal Christian nationalists, right? All that kind of stuff. And so these things keep on falling in the frame. What do the Democrats frame? They don't. They have a lot of different messages out there, right? But all messages are kind of like specific to a specific instance, and they're not about kind of the general, like building the beautiful tomorrow. That's what we see. Having said all, I know I keep on going way on a tangent, but the point being is that so we can look at all of that stuff. What Chris Hayes would say is like, yes, on the one hand, you have good policy, and then you need to communicate that policy. And the failure is on the communication of policy. The failure and the communication of what this presidency is. And when you're a political candidate, your primary job is to be an effective communicator. And that's the source of the panic. Now, because, I don't know, maybe this is maybe I'll find out in a few years that the way I'm thinking about this was really messed up, right, for myself. But we'll see. But for me, the way I saw this kind of debate kind of coming up, I looked at the debate coming up and I'm like, well, I'm not going to watch this thing because one, I know it's not going to change my mind, right? Is that there's no way in hell I'm ever going to vote for Trump. And you're damn well sure I'm going to vote, right? So, you know, this is kind of made up. I am not pro-authoritarian. That's all zero, right? And I know any other alternative that's out there, Robert F. Kennedy, that guy's freaking a disaster. He's horrific. He's a conspiracy theorist, right? And the sole job, there's a reason why these big money Republican donors are giving tons of money to Donald Trump and tons of money to Robert F. Kennedy. It's because they know that both of those is a vote against Biden, right? So whatever. But now you have a Democratic Party realize like, holy crap, we actually have a candidate who may not be able to beat Trump. And now all the rest of us are going to be put into jeopardy because of that. Here's Politico, for example. Now, Politico is always attempts to one's good side. You know, and the headline is a quote, "The movement to convince Biden to not run is real," unquote. Right. Now, this is an article from Jonathan Martin. He's a Politico's senior political columnist and politics bureau chief. Here it is. So I'm going to read you a little bit of this one. So this is from Politico. One House Democrat said he spoke for others in the wake of the president's stunningly feeble debate performance on Thursday. Quote, "The movement to convince Biden to not run is real," unquote. The House member, an outspoken defender of the president, said that the House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer shouldn't consider, quote, a combined effort to nudge Joe Biden out of the race, or should consider a combined effort to nudge Joe Biden out of the race. Crestfallen by the president's weak voice, pallid appearance, and meandering answers, numerous Democratic officials said Biden's bet on an early debate to rebut unceasing questions about his age had not only backfired, but done damage that may prove irreversible. The president had, in the first 30 minutes of the debate, fully affirmed doubts about his fitness. A second House Democrat said, quote, "reflection is needed," unquote, from Biden about the way ahead, and indicated the private text threads among lawmakers were even more dire, with some saying outright that the president needed to drop out of the race. A Democratic lobbyist close to many party officials also invoked Jeffries and Schumer, quote, "will they do something," unquote, before noting, hopefully, that Jeffries and former President Barack Obama are holding a fundraiser for House Democrats in New York on Friday. So now let's be clear. All of these quotes are anonymous quotes. We have some descriptors, but they're not named, right? And because they're not named, right, we don't know what their specific agendas are, right? With the exception to say the House member who's an outspoken defender of the president said that House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer should consider a combined effort to nudge Joe Biden out of the race. It does say that this is somebody who seems to be kind of like pro-Biden, and they're freaking out. Okay, it's like Washington Post. Here's the headlines in the Washington Post. Quote, for one, this is an analysis piece. This is not kind of a descriptive headline. Can Biden recover from his damaging debate performance? Analysis by Dan Baltz, a chief correspondent. So here we go. Quote, "There was only one question on the minds of Democrats as they awoke Friday after what many of them judged as the worst performance by a presidential candidate in the modern history of politics." Quote, colon, that can President Biden recover? Other presidents have stumbled in debates, but not quite like what happened to Biden on Thursday night. His overriding goal was to dispel doubts that he was too old and too frail to lead the country for another 4 years. Instead, he reinforced those doubts, and in a forum, the first debate hosted by CNN and broadcast seemingly everywhere, that could be the single most watched event of the 2024 campaign. Biden has time to recover. This debate was the earliest in history, and the election is more than 4 months away, normally an eternity in politics. Turnarounds can happen. Time is not the issue. But this is not a matter of simply changing campaign tactics or producing a clever new ads. His advisors can help. They can offer ideas, but this mostly falls on Biden's shoulders. And then he goes on to say, it's not as though Trump had a stellar evening. Far from it. He sought to tell voters that things were better when he was president, but in his own performance, he was the same Trump who was turned out of office in 2020, the same Trump the country has seen for nearly 9 years, perhaps even an exaggerated version. The former president lied his way through the evening, spewing statement after statement that he had little or no basis in fact, one wild claim after another. He blustered his way through pointed questions about the January 6th, 2021 attack on the Capitol, and he declined again to say that he would accept the results of the election if he loses. But it might not matter, thanks to the damage Biden did to himself. The president won many of the substantive exchanges. His performance grew steadier as the debate progressed, but first impressions matter. And for Biden, they were worse than many Democrats had feared. And though he improved as the evening went on, there were enough stumbles, pauses, mixed up words, and blank stares throughout the debate that those first impressions could stick. That the two men dislike one another is well known, but their exchanges became increasingly nasty and personal as the debate progressed. For many watching Thursday, the 90-minute debate was a reminder of why so many people are so dissatisfied with the choice they are being given. But unless something changes, this is the choice. And there you go. Right? This, again, we've talked about this again and again. The biggest problem is look, the biggest problem of Biden is not the quality of the policies, right? That is not it, right? Although I have to say what's happened with, in Gaza and what the Biden administration's position on Gaza, that has done significant policy damage, right? Has done at a policy level, has done significant damage to his support in the base, right? Especially among younger voters, especially among people of color. I mean, he's been horrible. And, and it shows not just that's not about his age, but rather his coming of age. That is what he's still kind of like stuck in a particular frame that was kind of, built up in the 80s and 90s. And this is causing severe damage, right? Oh, you got to be kidding me. Emily just said the Chevron decision has been just overturned by the Supreme Court. Holy crap. Okay. I have not read anything about this yet, but I'll get back to the debate in just 1 second. But thank you, Emily, for that. I will tell you this, is that this is one of the most significant decisions that will happen, and a significant in a negative way. Probably not going to have the direct immediate effect as the overturning of Roe v. Wade did, but this will nonetheless fundamentally change the direction of our government. And this, okay, very briefly, the Chevron doctrine said this. I think I talked about this on the last time we had a show. The Chevron doctrine said this. The Chevron doctrine was like, say, hey, it was about this. There was Chevron was being sued for pollutants that were put into the environment. The community basically said, hey, you got to stop doing this. Chevron said, no, we don't. This is not regulated, whatever it might be. And the question really was, because the EPA comes in and starts to regulate this, right? Basically saying that you can no longer pollute this stuff. And Chevron says, yes, we can. There's nobody who says this. But the Chevron doctrine said that, look, when a law is passed, right, in this case with the Clean Water Act or the Clean Air Act, or, talk about kind of pollutants that can harm people and things like this, the law is kind of like a broad-based law, right? The law is something that is like not specific to only kind of one, say, contaminant in this case, but rather the administrative bodies, right, like the Environmental Protection Agency, have the right then to make a determination about if something is harmful to people and then regulate it, right? Because it is within their sphere of expertise. So in other words, if chemical, like a chemical called, like, I don't know, chemical A, we'll just call it chemical A. If chemical A, right, is the reason why, you know, a law is being passed, say, hey, oh my God, we can't have our water contaminated in such a way that's going to cause this kind of harm to people. So because of the uprise around this stuff, we're going to say, you know, this is illegal, and that we want to ensure that you have clean water to make sure that our water is going to be clean for the future, right? What the Chevron case basically said is like, look, you don't have to go back to Congress every single time a new chemical comes up that is damaging. No, because you've established a principle in law that the water should be clean. So the EPA is the expert body that can determine whether a chemical is harmful or not, right? And so the Chevron doctrine said this: government agencies, administrative bodies like the EPA, right? National, the Department of Education, all these different agencies, they have the right to carry out, their mission because they're the experts who know this stuff, right? And you just think about it, you play it out in your head. It's like, can you imagine if every single time a new contaminant came up that found out that it's harmful to people, you'd have to have a new piece of legislation that would have to be argued in Congress before it could be regulated? We see how long things take, right? So that was kind of the idea. The idea is that the Chevron doctrine said, yes, these government agencies can do this thing. If what I'm seeing there in the in the headlines, if this is overturned, that means then, well, it'll be unclear how it's going to be tested, right? It's basically saying the EPA does not have the right to legislate this. And I'll tell you the main immediate concern of this, it has to do with climate change. Because the EPA has made determinations, as some other agencies had determinations, that we need to stop carbon emissions, right? Because it is overall harmful. And chemical manufacturers are being held accountable right now because for the pollutants they put into our grounds, into our water. And now the question is that there will not be able to regulate those emissions or regulate chemicals or regulate any of this stuff. Federal Drug Administration, do they really have the power to regulate and making sure that drugs are safe for us to take? Right? Remember that whole idea during COVID when everyone was when the right wing was all crazy about, hey, we should just take these horse pills and that will cure COVID, right? But wait a minute, the FDA says that this is not safe for humans. Like, who's the FDA to say we should be able to get those horse pills? And again, I hate to keep on leaning on the majority report today, but the majority report has, for literally as long as I've been listening to that show, has been talking about the Chevron doctrine, how important it is, because the right-wing judicial establishment, right, that whole network of folks has this decision in its sights. Right. If you remember, Steve Bannon has always said, we want to kind of get rid of the administrative state. That's what he's talking about. And they've helped build this, really this legal strategy long-term to get rid of these main things. So not only do they take away the rights of, over half of people in this country to right to an abortion, now they're basically saying that we have a government that cannot act to keep us safe. There you go. That's incredible. Well, I know what next show is going to be about. Well, that makes what we saw last night all that much more concerning. Let me do one more, and then we'll start to wind up and think about where we go from here. Last from the New York Times. This is a news analysis piece by Peter Barker, and the headline is "A Fumbling Performance and Panicking Party." Why do I read these headlines? Right, I can tell you, I know multiple people when I talk to them, and I say, hey, did you, you hear about this? And then you start talking. Oh yeah, did you see this? Did you see this? And I'll be like, oh yeah. And then did you see what? Oh no, I just read the headline. Right? I just read the headline in that first kind of paragraph and stuff. Headlines matter, right? Especially to folks whose major preoccupation is not following politics. Okay, so here's this Peter Baker, I'm sorry, in the New York Times. And I'll start to quote. So President Biden hoped to build fresh momentum for his re-election bid by agreeing to debate nearly 2 months before he is to be formally nominated. Instead, his halting and disjointed performance on Thursday night prompted a wave of panic among Democrats and reopened discussions about whether he should be the nominee at all. If that is all I read, right, as a lot of folks, it's true. The headline, a fumbling performance in a panicking party, and that paragraph, that's the takeaway. Let's read a little bit more of here. So over the course of 90 minutes, a raspy voice, Mr. Biden, struggled to deliver his lines and counter a sharp, though deeply dishonest former President Donald Trump, raising doubts about the incumbent president's ability to wage a vigorous and competitive campaign for 4 months before the election. Rather than dispel concerns about his age, Mr. Biden, 81, made it a central issue. Democrats who have defended the president for months against his doubters, including members of his own administration, traded frenzied phone calls and text messages within minutes of the start of the debate as it became clear that Mr. Biden was not at all his sharpest. Practically in despair, some took to social media to express shock, while others privately discussed among themselves whether it was too late to persuade the president to bow out in favor of a younger candidate. Quote, Biden is about to face a crescendo of calls to step aside, said a veteran Democratic strategist who has staunchly backed Mr. Biden publicly. Quote, Joe had a deep well of affection among Democrats. It has run dry, unquote. Quote, parties exist to win, unquote, this Democrat continued. Quote, the man on the stage with Trump cannot win. The fear of Trump stifled criticism of Biden. Now that same fear is going to fuel calls for him to step aside, unquote. A group of House Democrats said they were watching the debate together, and one who spoke on the condition of anonymity acknowledged that it was a disaster for Mr. Biden. The person said the group was discussing the need for a new presidential nominee. Mark Buell, a prominent donor for Mr. Biden and the Democratic Party, said after the debate that the president had to strongly consider whether he is the best person to be the nominee. Quote, do we have time to put somebody else in there? Unquote, Mr. Buell said. He added that he was not calling for Mr. Biden to withdraw, but that, quote, Democratic leadership has a responsibility to go to the White House and clearly show what America is thinking, because democracy is at stake here and we're all nervous. Mr. Biden's goal in accepting a general election debate earlier than ever held in presidential history was to recalibrate the contest as a choice between himself and a felon who tried to overrun an election and would, in his view, destroy American democracy if given the power of the presidency again, which I wholeheartedly agree with that is true. Mr. Biden left the CNN studio in Atlanta, instead facing a referendum on himself and his capacity that will reverberate for days, if not longer. So that's where we're at. Now, I will caution everybody. Well, this is one of the reasons why, I mean, where I started this tonight and saying I didn't watch the debate because I'm really thinking about I've been thinking about my relationship to all of this stuff in a way that is much more healthy, that is not about the immediacy of having to have the hot take, right? Having to kind of come back and following every kind of machination here, right? I've been thinking a lot about needing to be thinking about the long game. And what does that actually mean on a daily basis? How we approach these kind of elections, how we kind of do it. So for me, right, instead of acting from a point of a moment of crisis, right, which clearly people in these articles are, right, there's about the alarm and the reaction and the crisis and all that kind of stuff. And look, I feel it, right? It's not that I don't feel those things. But there are 4 months ahead here, and it seems to me that the real issue is going to be which direction the future. What is the future that we want? This should be the beginning of the end of a particular mode of Democratic Party leadership that asks us to just play team sports, and one that instead will start thinking seriously about strategy. Now, I watch local Democrats in these local school board races do astounding things in terms of organization on the ground, in terms of like building power from the ground up, about communicating their message effectively, And why could they do that? Because they were embedded in these communities. They weren't kind of outside consultants coming in to tell us about like what we should be thinking. They were people who had a real constituency in the community, and they spoke for that constituency stronger. And those people who might not have been paying close attention, right, saw that and said, yeah, yes, this is the future that we want. This is the kind of school system that we want. We don't want one that's going to exclude kids. We want one that is welcoming. It's going to do ever. We don't want to erase our history. We want our kids to know our history. Don't we always learn those who don't know their history are doomed to repeat it? Well, guess what? These other people, these right-wing kind of like Bombs for Liberty people, what are they trying to do? They're trying to erase our history. They're putting it a bad thing. Everything that I've learned, like they're trying to take it away. There was a narrative about who our kids are, and they are all our kids. And all our kids are different. And they all should be welcome in those spaces. They're about an education with integrity. It was based upon facts and history, not kind of like ideological agenda. They're about the necessity of having difficult conversations, even when people disagree about stuff. And to do that in a spirit of that's what democracy is about, right? So we saw that happen at the local level. We saw it here in Penridge. We saw it in Central Bucks, right? We're seeing it in Palisades. We're seeing it in Souderton. We're seeing these kind of like, I mean, this is just in this like little kind of small area. We saw it in North Penn, right? I mean, and that's really the model, right? This has to be something that is representative of the people as they are, not as this small group of Democratic Party leaderships believe we should be. And that means that the Democratic Party is going to represent any kind of future. It has to be much, look, again, getting much better, but it even needs more diverse. It needs to be more kind of rooted in grassroots. It has to be more willing to fight for that future. And most importantly, in that process, as a corrective, they need to be able to kind of, along with us, articulate what that beautiful tomorrow is affirmatively. Because bad Trump is not a future. Bad Trump is about personality conflict. It's about the freaking destructive celebrity culture that we have in this country. That we look to kind of like the leader to solve our problems instead of demanding that the leader do what we want them to do. The right wing in this country has learned that lesson. They have run people out of office for not agreeing to their, again, horrific agenda, but nonetheless, they're organized and they're passionate about it. At this point, again, my belief is that the Democratic Party is our space to work this stuff out. Because it is a broad, messy coalition, if you could even call it a coalition. It's more of like a grouping of a kind of a wide variety of interests. But we have an opportunity to basically determine whether or not this party is, first of all, what can it be? Which means, what is it that we, and I use that very broadly, about people who don't want to see an authoritarian future, who believe in, say, democracy and the rights and justice, want to see a deepening of that stuff, don't want to see billionaires run away and kind of make decisions for us, then we need to be able to kind of have those, have that kind of, see that future. And that's going to be a messy process. But a good one, a healthy one, right? One that actually echoes the kind of demands that parents and community members were making about what our schools should do. And it would be, I think, super healthy for Democratic Party leadership to take a page out of the playbook of those parents and community members who organize at the local level in the school boards about how you actually do this, how you develop a message, what you do in order to kind of see like you're willing to fight for that beautiful tomorrow. We shall see, I say. Now look, and now having said that, I can't as much as I see what I've seen of the debate, what I'm seeing in this commentary, all of this is really problematic. I mean, it should be a cause for concern. However, crisis, I'm not so sure. I think that, look, I'm actually agnostic about whether or not they should find a new candidate to run, or Biden should step down. I see the practical problems with that. Right? Is that who? It's not as if the Democrats have really kind of made a space to kind of really put Kamala Harris out front to kind of like, you know, to be to be that voice to kind of come in and take over. I'm not saying she's good or she's bad. I'm not even going there. I'm just saying we haven't seen the ground prepared for that. And so if the next logical person to go to is the vice president to put up as the candidate, well, then who's the vice president? Or if you're going to choose a new presidential candidate, does that mean that they get to choose their new vice presidential candidate? Or is Kamala Harris still staying there? How does that work out? And what would it look like for there to be kind of like, you know, whatever, months on end of kind of like chaos in the Democratic Party trying to figure out who the hell is going to run, right? So I see those negative sides. But, you know, hey, look, you've got a lot of really talented politicians. You've got a really talented younger politicians who would freaking make mincemeat out of Trump. And if they have the strong support of the Democratic Party, right, to go forward, you know what? I could see that being that could work. But frankly, Democratic Party leadership are always scared. They're always afraid, so they won't do it. They'll be too worried to do that, I believe. But I could be wrong, right? So agnostic on that thing. What we do know, Donald Trump put 3 Supreme Court justices on the Supreme Court that overturned Roe v. Wade, now just overturned the Chevron doctrine, has wreaked havoc, one thing after another, with our kind of the Democratic base, legal base for kind of promoting democracy. They are extremists. They are kind of like, you know, the most corrupt Supreme Court justice we've ever seen. We see Clarence Thomas, the kind of gifts that he's been taking. We see what's happening now. It's like was with Alito, again, with his, you know, full support of insurrection. So, I mean, all this stuff is going on, right? We have a Supreme Court that's basically lost its legitimacy in part because of what Donald Trump has done to that. And that's a direction that they want to go. We had, again, with that decision about the overturning Roe v. Wade, like we basically say abortion is kind of at risk and has been taken away for, you know, what is it? Something like 40%, 30%, 35%, something like something in there, like has been taken away as a viable option for something like 30% of people in the states because of laws that happen at the state level. We saw, I just mentioned the school boards. We saw a president who basically gave voice to right-wing Christian nationalist extremists and promoted violence as a way to kind of solving our problems. And that kind of bled into our own communities as it did in the January 6th insurrection. We have a guy who has now been convicted of sexual assault, been convicted of 34 felonies, been convicted of fraud. People frequently remind me of this, that, you know, like my wife will remind me of this and other friends will remind me, is like most people don't look at those things as good things. There is a very vocal minority that are deeply problematic and are a significant challenge for the future of this democracy, to be sure. But those are not the values that are held by most people. The question is how do you activate one to make a choice for Joe Biden when Joe Biden has performed so poorly? That's the challenge. And part of it is a reminder of what's been taken away. But then we have to think about what is it that we want. I happen to think a lot of that has to do with like, what's the tomorrow we want our kids to be growing up in? With that next generation. How do we want to spend, for those of us who are older, how do we want to spend our end years. We want to see our Social Security taken away from us so that we'll kind of spend the last years of our lives in poverty to pull out the proverbial cat food canister as a way of surviving. Do we want to have to be, as older folks, as older Americans, do we want to have to burden our children to taking care of us because that is the only option? When we get sick, do we want to be able to kind of get help? Because the medical system as it is now is a freaking joke, and you all know it. I know it. Is education a right in this country? Why is it that the vast majority of the kind of like, say, advanced nations in this country, that's even a loaded word, comparable countries in this world, why is it that higher education for them is free enough, for us it's not? After a family has a child, why is it the vast majority of countries in the world provide parental leave for like months, paid parental leave, and we accept what, crumbs? Why are we going to let people like Jeff Bezos, about Elon Musk, Jeffrey Yass, all these people, why are we letting these billionaires like pretend that they're kings and make decisions for us when these should be our decisions, not theirs? And why do we think our own labor has no worth and only their wealth? Come on. So anyways, that's where we're at. So this is going to be quite a day, quite a week, quite a 4 months, and we'll see where we go from here. So again, love to hear your kind of additional thoughts. Feel free to shoot me kind of emails, ragingchickenpress@gmail.com. Hit me up on social media, although I've been a little less present on social media as of late because, it's a shit show. Yeah, good luck. But for now, I wish you all a good weekend. I don't know if it is exactly where you're at, but I woke up this morning, was pleasantly surprised that it felt like nice outside, right? As opposed to the craziness that we've had so far. I'm really excited. It's been a cool couple of weeks. My son is actually on a school trip in Portugal and Spain, and he'll be coming back on Tuesday. And I'm so thrilled that he seems to be having an awesome time. I'm enjoying the first 2 episodes of House of Dragons, and I have to apologize to everybody who's listening to my show. Last time I had was 2 weeks ago, and I was really excited about the startup of the House of Dragon, but instead of saying House of Dragon, I said Rings of Power, which of course that doesn't come out until August, and for whatever, my brain was referring to the right thing but saying the wrong thing. And so I got these messages both on Discord and then emails and messages. They're like, hey, wait, that doesn't come out in until August. I'm like, what? I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I said that. So my apologies if I got everybody really excited. And then but House of Dragon has been cool. Yeah, I love it too, Emily. I'm just, we'll see. The first episode, I thought, okay, this is great. Second episode was really kind of, I think, setting the stage for what the drama is going to be coming out. So it was a little bit of I thought kind of like I don't know, slower is the wrong word, but it had a shift in direction that I thought it was going to go. So we kind of slowed down a little bit. I love the first season. And so I hope the second one does well too. So love to see and hear what you're reading, what you're watching. And hopefully we're going to get that culture podcast going soon. That Amy and I were talking about before. Amy Connect and I were talking about doing something to review what's going on and stuff. And I've just been a scheduling disaster lately. So anyways, thank you all for kind of tuning in. Thank you for all listening. Thank you all for all the support you showed over the years. And let's get to it. All right. All right, everybody, this is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken. If you want to help us out, you can head on over to patreon.com/rcpress. You get all the details. Yes, everybody, have a good weekend. We can do this. Let's do it. See ya!